From our 22 News Broadcast Center, this is 22 News in Focus.
Good afternoon and welcome to 22 News in Focus. I'm Ciara Speller. The 2024 election is only 3 weeks away now. While many people are looking forward to casting their vote for the next president of the United States, Massachusetts voters will also have 5 ballot questions to consider. So joining me now to talk about the upcoming election is Tony Signoli of A.L. Signoli Company, political, governmental, and media consultants. We thank you so much for being here with us, Tony.
Thank you. Absolutely.
So despite it being a presidential election year, there aren't many local races. So are there any that stand out to you that might be of interest?
What's amazing, this is a year where all the House members and Senate members in Massachusetts, 200 seats, should be up for grabs, should be all for re-election. But you have very, very few people running. So what stands out right here, right now, in our neck of the woods in Western Massachusetts? It's the Westfield and Southampton seat, currently held by State Representative Kelly Peace, a Republican. He has a Democrat running against him who's well known, a Westfield City Councilor, Bridget Matthews Kane, and it is a heck of a spirited race. You take a ride through Westfield, and it's old school. There's lawn signs. Both candidates are knocking on doors, and it's very spirited. It's kind of cool and fun to see that that's the case. The 3rd Berkshire is another. So that's Pittsfield, Lenox, Great Barrington. Smitty Pignatelli held that seat for 20 years. He decided to retire, and there are 2 people running there, Leah Davis and Mary Beth Mitz. So that one's active and aggressive. You know, amazingly too, Dan Carey, state rep, East Hampton neck of the woods, well known, decided not to run for re-election, running instead for registrar of probate. No one's running against him. And Omar Gomez of East Hampton ran for a seat unopposed. So he will be the state representative for East Hampton. Those are the ones. That's it. There's not a lot else going on.
Yeah, but some big shoes to fill. Like you
Yes.
said, 20 years, so a lot riding on that.
Yeah, Kerry and Pignatelli, they are veterans, and to see them go, you hope that the folks that fill their seats will certainly, be able to do what they need to do.
Yeah. So there are several state representatives and senators that are up for re-election, and some have no opponents. Is this a concern that there are so few people running for state legislature?
What a great question, because it is a big deal. For those of us that watch it carefully, and not in a Democratic sense or a Republican sense, to see so few folks running is amazing. To see that the interest doesn't seem to be there to run for the House or the Senate. Or is it that it's just so expensive to run, so hard to unseat an incumbent? Flip side of that, I see a difference between the East and the West. Here in Western Massachusetts, a lot of folks are pretty happy with their legislators. You take a Senator Vilas, a Senator Gomez, a Senator Oliveira, a Senator Comerford. The body of work that our senators do out here, it is stunning. And in the other side of the state, it kind of pales by comparison. Our folks out here are fewer to represent huger geographic areas, and they have to work so hard at it. So sometimes that can be the argument too, Sierra, that they're doing a good job so no one's challenging. But it is daunting to see that there aren't that many races. And it's unfortunate because it means a lot of things don't get done. And it's been noted that this legislative session, a lot of things didn't happen that especially our Western Mass reps and senators wanted to see done.
Well, let's talk about Congressman Richie Neal and Jim McGovern. So they're facing challengers. What are those races going to look like?
I'll start off with Jim McGovern. Amazing. He is everywhere in that district. Like Neal, you see him on the weekends. Our members of Congress here are different than in the other states that I'm involved in. Sometimes there are places across America where folks don't see their member of the House for a year at a time sometime, or months and months. Neal and McGovern, they're always around. You're always seeing them. They're at a crop walk. They're at handing out a check. So McGovern's candidate running against him is Cornelius Shea. And Cornelius himself has said, I'm just kind of running for the heck of running. I didn't think it should be an unopposed seat. So I don't think there's any problem there for Jim McGovern. And for Richie Neal, pretty much the same thing. His candidate running against him, Nadia Milleron, is spirited, doing a lot of television advertising, but not really going at him too hard, Both incumbents are so well known, and it's stunning the kind of support that they've got. So you never know. On any given Tuesday, anything can happen, but I would say that we see Neal and McGovern return. And why is that important if they are returned? If the House stays Democratic, these gentlemen are both powerful chairmen. As we know, Neal was chairman of Ways and Means. He's ranking member now. He's probably returned there. And Jim McGovern has become such a leader in the House of Representatives.
Yeah, always nice to see them here in Western Massachusetts, and having them on the program as well is always nice. So Elizabeth Warren, I want to quickly talk about her. Two-term incumbent. She also has a challenger. Tell us who Republican John Deaton is.
Interesting fella. He's got a great background, similar to J.D. Vance. Grew up real poor, wrote a book about it. Self-made person, attorney, has done well in a business sense. Former United States Marine, cancer survivor, and is running against Elizabeth Warren as a Republican. So that's the background on him. He's a first-timer. We haven't seen him before. It hasn't been that active a campaign and not a big dollar expenditure. He's not getting a lot of institutional Republican support. The MAGA folks in Massachusetts don't care for him very much. And a week ago, he actually threatened to leave the Republican Party because he felt that he was more pro-choice than the party, and he actually tried to make the case that he was more pro-choice than Elizabeth Warren. You can't make that case against Elizabeth Warren, who beat Scott Brown on that issue to take the Senate seat that was once held by Ted Kennedy.
So we also have 5 statewide ballot questions that Bay Staters are going to be voting on, right? I'm going to have us break them down, explain them. Question 1 is the state auditor's authority to audit the legislature. So let's talk about question 1.
It is a huge deal. This is something that the state auditor, Diana DiZoglio, tried to legislate. As a legislator herself, she tried to bring this onto the floor. Couldn't get anywhere with it. As you can imagine, House and Senate leadership, not for this kind of thing. Don't want people seeing how the money's getting spent by the institution itself. This is a popular piece right now in Massachusetts. There's about 70% of the electorate willing to vote for this to audit the legislature. She's got a heck of an issue here as state auditor. As a matter of fact, as we're sitting here right now, she is walking across Massachusetts from one end to the other to bring attention to this. So she is very spirited. What's intriguing to me on this one, Sierra, is I thought that the House and the Senate leadership, House Speaker, Senate President, would fight this, that they'd put together a campaign. They've decided, let's back away from this. It's that popular and that populist. The big question, it's a binding question that would enforce this, but will the intent of what we vote for, if we vote for this, actually be the case? Will the legislature follow through? We've had a lot of times where we've seen binding initiatives put forth by the electorate, and then the legislature doesn't do anything on it. This will still be a battle, I think, after November.
All right, lots more to talk about in terms of the questions. We'll have question 2 once we come back from a quick break. And we'll continue our conversation once we return. You're watching 22 News in Focus. Welcome back to 22 News in Focus. Today we're joined with Tony Signoli to talk about the upcoming election in November. We were just talking about the ballot questions before the break, so we're going to pick back up with ballot question 2.
Yeah.
Let's have you break that down.
That's the big one, MCAS. That's where a lot of money is being expended right now. And it's one of the toughest questions, too, because there's a lot riding on this. Do we get rid of the MCAS testing for our children across Massachusetts? And what's the impact? Is it good? Is it bad? The arguments on both sides are pretty good. But you've got the Massachusetts Teachers Association, one of the most powerful organizations in Massachusetts, who would like to see MCAS gone. And they make a heck of a good argument across the board, especially on one particular piece, that it's poor children in poor districts, in poor cities and towns that are affected in the worst way by MCAS. It's just not a fair test. It's not equitable. On the other side, there's a thought that without MCAS, how do you judge how school systems are doing, how our students are doing, and does this also do them a disservice when they go to apply to a college and that standard's not there for the college to take a look at? It's a complicated one, and it's neck and neck. I can tell you right now, we saw polling today on this, and it's very, very, very close. It's like nip and tuck.
Yeah, and we hear from teachers all the time about how the pandemic changed learning as well, so you factor that all in, you know?
Big time. So that is a major impact. And they're making that argument. What we're seeing right now, teachers and parents are banding together to say, let's get rid of MCAS. We're seeing that movement.
Okay. So we have question 3. That's the unionization for transportation network drivers. Let's break that one down.
Most people know that one as the Uber Lyft question. And a lot of folks would say, what does this matter to me, the average person in Western Massachusetts? Not as much in Western Massachusetts, but if you live in Eastern Massachusetts, where you're depending on Uber and Lyft, it's a big deal. You want your Uber and Lyft driver to be happy, to be well paid, and where we have so many transportation breakdowns in Boston, the T, the Green Line, we hear about it all the time. A lot of folks are relying on these folks. So this is kind of an internal battle, unionized, not unionized. The workers are saying we are in a bad situation against a large corporate. Most people think of Uber as independent drivers and whatnot, but these are really large corporations that own these things and are working these things. So that's the battle here, and they've got to reach out to voters' heartstrings on this one, the workers themselves, to try to pull this one off. Another that's very close, because a lot of people just don't understand it.
Right. Question number 4 is the limited legalization and regulation of certain natural psychedelic substances. So a yes vote would allow persons over 21 to use certain natural psychedelic substances under licensed supervision. That goes on as well. And then a no vote would make no change in the law regarding natural psychedelic substances. So have you delved a little bit more into what a yes vote would mean?
Amazing again, because it's a binding question. It's like when we took a look at legalizing marijuana in Massachusetts. But this is different. And you hear that word psychedelic.
Right.
And you don't think, what's that? Immediately you have all kinds of wild thoughts that come up with it. And as someone who graduated from classical high school, the same place that Dr. Timothy Leary, the king of LSD, graduated, right? This one intrigues the heck out of me. It is nip and tuck. It is very, very close, because a lot of people don't understand this. The highest undecided of all the questions is on this one. But now as it's narrowing down, on the pro side, they're trying to say, well, we've legalized marijuana and there's been benefits medicinally to a lot of people. Veterans think it's a great thing, PTSD. This can do the same thing. It's a little bit harder to come across with that when you're talking about something that's called psychedelics. So that one will be more nip and tuck before all is said and done. And it's one that really has to be explained to the average person. I think you're going to see more blanks on that question than any of those, because people don't understand what is this. Yeah.
And lastly, we have question number 5, which is minimum wage for tipped workers. This one, we've heard from both sides.
Absolutely.
And so let's just, break that down a little bit as to why there is such that pull, that tug, and pull there.
The question on tips is hot, because on the federal level, you've got 2 folks running for president of the United States that are saying, let's not tax tips anymore. So it's gotten hotter. In this instance, we're talking about something slightly different. But you've got the Massachusetts Restaurant Association that is against this. And in that regard, it's the large restaurants that are against this. A lot of independent restaurant owners are saying, no, I want this for my workers. It's really a worker versus corporate kind of a thing on this particular one. And this is a heartstring kind of an issue too, because so many of us, we go into a restaurant and we love the person that's serving us. We realize how hard they're working, and it's at minimum wage, and that this should be addressed. And it's more respect for workers in that regard. On the other side, you've got, the restaurant interest, the larger restaurant interest, saying you add that cost now to what we're already seeing with the price of meat. We're looking at the $20 hamburger as a normal kind of thing in Massachusetts right now. How do we do that? So there's good arguments economically on both sides.
Yeah, so, looking at all 5 questions, which ones are we thinking are the ones that are really going to have the voters thinking?
It's the MCAS piece, because whether you're a grandmother or a grandfather or a parent, a teacher, folks are talking about this one. What really is the impact? And we take educational issues more serious than others. We're talking about our children. And whether you're for MCAS or against MCAS, you want to make the right decision here. This is going to be, I think, the one that's going to have most people stop. You can do the psychedelic thing. Does that affect everybody? No. The Uber Lyft piece, maybe not. But this is everybody's children. And the arguments are fierce on both sides. And you've got some big money being spent on this right now, on this question.
All right, Tony, thank you for your insight. The anticipation is growing as we head toward the presidential election. We'll be talking about what we can expect leading up to that big day. Stay with us on 22 News in Focus. We're back here now with 22 News in Focus and talking about the upcoming election with political consultant Tony Signoli. The presidential campaign is a contentious one and has had its twists and turns. We had President Biden dropping out, VP Harris stepping up. The debate between she and former President Trump was a lively one, right? And then the debate between vice presidential candidates was tame in comparison. So let's talk about what we saw there.
Well said with that comparison. We saw Kamala Harris show up with the A game. She was phenomenal. She scored in every way we look at a debate. that we would weigh it, that we would judge it, and doing it unbiasedly, she ran away with it in that regard. Trump had a tough night, and bottom line, for his base, it would make no difference. They're going to stay the course with him. But for Kamala Harris, that was the interview with the United States to say, I'm running, I'm capable. And it's certainly, too, she wasn't just being weighed against Donald Trump that night. She was being weighed against poor Joe Biden and his poor debate performance before. The vice presidential was interesting. Waltz did okay. There was this whole thing to try to lower expectations for him, but J.D. Vance did very well. That J.D. Vance that showed up to the debate is not the same person that's out there campaigning. He knew that he had a more general electorate audience to speak to, that this wasn't just MAGA base. And he played to that. He did very well. The theatrics, the drama, he was good. You could see where, there's a movie about this guy's life, and he probably must have been taking notes when they were shooting it. He did well. Yeah.
And so what are we thinking are the key concerns atop of voters' minds?
It's the
American
sure.
people and the Bay State as well.
I love it. What I'm finding in all the states that we're involved in, and we're heavily involved in the swing states, it's the same thing everywhere, Sierra. Economy, economy, economy. Whether you're wealthy or whether you're poor, you're worried about the cost of living and worried, will your child be able to have the same level of quality of life that you have? For an example, how do you pay the mortgage? What's the story on food, et cetera? And you're weighing what both parties, what both candidates are saying about what they're actually going to do about these things. So number one, it is economy. And then there are those, heartstring, difficult issues. Abortion, women's rights, et cetera. That is going to drive a massive number of people to vote. You're going to see that being the case there. And then migration has become such an issue in the United States. We are seeing it in every state that we're involved in, even states that have no impact by being close to the border. I'm stunned by how huge it has become on both sides, where there's just a bottom line from everyone. I want an answer on this. Fix this, let's get this done. Those are the big issues right now.
Yeah, and then we're also seeing, of course, the hurricanes that are impacting us here in the U.S., but then we also have war overseas. A lot of conversation about that.
That's another piece of this. The domestic stuff is one thing, but most people, especially as they get close to Election Day, realize you're voting for the person that's going to be sitting behind the big desk with the phone, with the nuclear codes, et cetera. This is big stuff. And with the bad characters that are out there, North Korea, Iran, et cetera, Russia, China, and with even some of these players messing around with our election yet again, on both sides, it seems to be. This is heavy duty stuff. The person that's in that office the next 4 years, this is going to be a tough one.
And what are the issues that Trump and Harris are focusing on to really get those votes?
Trump's issues now, and we're seeing it with Vance and the work that the campaign is doing, with social media, with algorithms, et cetera. There is really going at an effort to bolster the MAGA base and then cherry pick those undecided voters, the few that there are that are in those swing states. And they're doing it by accentuating MAGA issues, almost to a point, where they're hitting push button issues. So it's gun rights, et cetera. And also it's kind of like us and them. It is a significant push for the MAGA base voter. They're not worried too much about, is there a way to pick up black, Hispanic votes? They know what they're going to get in that regard and whatnot. But you're seeing them with just one argument. Kamala Harris, different ballgame. In the same way that you're seeing her go on Call Me Daddy, the podcast, to, Colbert, et cetera. She's out there everywhere right now, The View, et cetera. This is not something new. We saw Bill Clinton start it back in the 80s, when he went, I think it was Leno, he went on Leno's show. We're seeing the same thing here right now. She's hitting every different niche that she has to, that she can, as she's trying to pick up those same voters that haven't made up their mind yet.
Right.
And we're talking about a small number of people, less than 300 spread across those different states. So that's the difference right now.
Yeah.
The Harris folks, they're going after everything. Trump's just doubling down on that same message over and over again.
And in doing so, demographics as well, right? The younger demographic. Of course, you're on Call Her Daddy,
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. That's exactly where she's going right now. And she knows that's where most of the undecided is. They're not happy with certain things that they're dealing with right now. The cost of living themselves, the inability to maybe to get an apartment, etc. So she's got to make that appeal there, and you'll see a lot more. Plus, there's social media doubles down with those bases as well too.
Yeah.
And this thought of algorithms, I won't bore you with the viewers with it right now. I don't even understand what we're doing with AI and algorithms. I just know we're spending hundreds of thousands, if not millions, in some of the things that we're involved in right now in those realms. Stunning.
How tight do we think this race is going to be?
In every poll, and the internal polls as well that I look at, and what we call the crosstabs, not just the horse race of the question, one versus the other, it's going to be tight because the number of undecided, as small as it may seem to be in the swing states, it's larger across the nation, and that's hard for me to believe. You'd think by this point, we know where people are going to be. Sure, Harris got into this race late after Biden exited, but you think you'd have a general idea of where you want to be on this one. So that number of undecided is what's on our minds all the time. And as we're watching them kind of move around, a little trigger issue here, gosh, how is FEMA dealing with Florida, et cetera? Southern states looking at that, obviously not just Florida. Any little thing, another eruption with Israel and Lebanon, something going on with Korea, all these things can have an impact. October surprises, that's what we're watching for right now, Sierra.
And our final few seconds left, what can we expect to see in the next couple of weeks here?
You're going to see phenomenal amounts of television advertising. You're not going to be able to pick up your phone and not get a message from one side or the other side. You're going to see a big double down on that. And you're going to see, I think, one other piece, old-fashioned, old-school voter ID has been going on. You're going to see folks hustling in key areas to get people and bring them to vote, especially because a lot of states are voting already right now, and you're seeing that drive to get the mail-in ballot in or bring people to the polls. It's already begun.
All right, Tony, thank you so much for your insight.
Thank you.
We'll have our final words after a short break. You're watching 22 News in Focus. You've been watching 22 News in Focus, and we've been talking with political consultant Tony Signoli about the upcoming election on November 5th. Tony, as always, we thank you so much for being here and your insight.
Thank you. Great questions, and the biggest thing I can say to the audience is get out and vote. It's going to make a difference. It affects your pocketbook, especially with these questions in Massachusetts. Thank you, Sierra.
All right, thank you, Tony. And to our viewers at home, if you missed any of our program, you can find it in full on our website at wwlp.com. From all of us here at 22 News, have a great day.